Today we're going to have a chat with Dr. Mel Broadhurst from Alderney and the Alderney Wildlife Trust about seagrass. Okay, so we're going to start with our first question. What species of seagrass do we get here in the Channel Islands?
Well, across the Bailiwick and also Jersey, we have two key species of eelgrass. The first one is called dwarf eelgrass, and it's very much what the name says. It's a very small, slender eelgrass. It's green, and it basically looks like green spaghetti. That's the best description of it. The second species, and this is the one that people most probably think about when they consider eelgrass, is what's called common eelgrass, and that's much bigger and denser, and it's very much what you think of like a turf of grass in the sea. So those are the two key species for the Channel Islands.
Cool, very nice. And how prominent are they around the Bailiwick? Do you find it everywhere, or is that just in localized areas? Do we know about them?
Well, as a starter, we know there's only some small patches of the dwarf eelgrass, and that's on at Herm. And we've only found that, like I said, in little small dense patches there. We haven't found any on Alderney, and I'm not sure if we've found enough on Guernsey for that species. For the common eelgrass, like the really big eelgrass that you think that are like dense meadows, like floating in the sea, for Alderney, we've got quite a few bays now that we've recorded with that species. And also for Guernsey, we're finding that's quite frequent around our coasts. But what we have to remember is eelgrass, they tend to be in sandy, gravelly substrates. So you have to imagine you're walking along a bay or a beach, and they're very much lower shore. So it's where, you know, the tide's gone out and you're walking along and you can spot these like turfs of grass poking up out the sand. I think for us, our records are quite poor, and this is kind of where, for us as scientists within the Channel Islands, is to get those records in and to really verify where we have this important habitat.
So when did you start with the Bailiwick Seagrass Project, and what was its purpose?
Well, we started the midsummer in 2019. So quite a few of us around the Bailiwick, so you know, from the Biodiversity Partnership and the Guernsey Biological Record Centres, myself up in Alderney, we knew we had eelgrass present. We have some great anecdotal evidence of eelgrass around the Bailiwick. We just didn't have those vital records because we know it's an important habitat. So sort of the summer of 2019, we all decided, let's set up a really simple, easy way to record eelgrass around our shores. And this is very much with the public eye. So we set up some workshops, and I invited people on Alderney and Guernsey, like just to say, this is what eelgrass is. Can you look for it for us? Obviously, we did really well in 2019, as I think most projects did. We then hit 2020, and well, we all know what happened there with the pandemic, but we were still able to request via social media for people to go out during their exercise breaks, and when we could do more last summer, just to get, you know, it was literally get a pin on the map. Have you seen this? And that's the point that we're up to. We've got some really good points, especially around Guernsey's amazing. That the amount of like people that have come back to us saying we've spotted it here has been brilliant. So in the last years, we've done well as a start to work out where our eelgrass is. We're now at the point that we, you know, as a scientist, I want to know more now. I want to know, like, how big are these beds? What's living in these beds? What's threatening these beds for us to look at, like, mitigating and looking to protect it better.
Okay, yeah, and so you sound quite passionate about it. So why? What is the which is important. What do you think is the importance of seagrass actually? What role does it have in terms of you know?
I could speak about this forever. So the first thing that I cannot stress enough is this habitat. Imagine that green, dense grass that's living out in the sea. it's a habitat forming species. It creates a habitat for other species to live in. It's not just doing its own thing. It's not only that, the types of species within those eelgrass beds, it's the number of species is really high, and also the number of species is the number of individuals. So things like, it supports juvenile fish. It's not just, it's lots of fish, it's lots of different types of fish, and lots of different types of fish within that. All the different types of species that are there. You've got sea anemones that attach to the blades of the grass. You've also got endemic species. So those are species that you will only find on eelgrass that live there. Things like, there's really cryptic, like seaweeds. A lot of mollusks lay their eggs on the eelgrass blades, like squid. And what's really interesting is underneath, it's very much like a grassy turf. It's got all these root systems called rhizomes, so it's like a horizontal root system. And what these do is it makes air pockets in the sand. So things like burrowing worms, that a lot of other species will feed off, live there, burrowing mollusks. So it's really important, not within the blades, but also underneath. The other added thing in terms of it's highly biodiverse, the areas adjacent to the bed will always also be rich in life, which you might not get in another marine habitat. So in terms of life, it's really rich, and it's got those special species that people fall over themselves, like seahorses, which I've yet to see. I've not seen one. Okay. That is my aim. The other thing that's really nice to know about eelgrass beds is you find them in sheltered locations, but what they do is provide shelter. So for us, it's great for things like, it reduces coastal erosion, because that mat of roots is stabilizing those sediments in the shore. So for us, in terms of living on the coast, and it buffers big tides and wave action, it's quite nice to live nearby. It helps us. The other key thing that's only just come out recently, it's actually being seen as a good habitat, a useful and valuable habitat for storing carbon. And that's because it's a bizarre plant. Like, what you might not realize is it's actually a terrestrial plant. And what it does, it produces leaf litter, no different to any plants on the in the terrestrial land. And this can break down into like organic carbon, and then other sources of carbon will get locked into the sediment. So it's the idea is it's preventing carbon entering the atmosphere, which obviously has implications for climate change and ocean acidification.
Okay, so that's kind of a massive
yes, sorry.
Well, we can actually see we can really see the importance that it has, because if it's literally like an underwater meadow, we all know what
and some places are in acres. You get acres of these like forests of eelgrass. It's truly, it is an amazing habitat for the marine environment.
And so it's a shame that we don't see them that often, isn't it? Or I guess if you don't go underwater, you not really see it. So maybe that's why maybe there's a certain amount of ignorance.
I might have to counter argue on that.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
In Guernsey, on a very low spring tide, you can go out and see them. Alderney's different. You have to snorkel or dive for them. But when you have to get your tide timetable, and then look for the twice a month, look for the really low tide, so something like 0.8, 0.9, and then go down on the shore and have a look, and you'll see it. It will be straggly on the shore, because obviously the tide's gone out, but you will see dense patches of the common eelgrass.
So for the winter swimmers and enthusiasts of the seagrass, where would you advise for people to go in Guernsey for a quick bath and quick observation?
We've had a really nice example. We had someone attend our eelgrass workshop in Guernsey, and then they came to Alderney last summer for a holiday and came out with me. for fun, which I was just like, of course. And then they went back to Guernsey because I took them out snorkeling, showed them some more eelgrass. And in Havelock Bay, they're sea swimmers. They actually went out and marked boundaries for me. So Havelock Bay is quite a nice one to have a look at. Obviously, there's a really nice bay off Herm as well. And then I think sort of north of St. Peter Port, there is some really nice eelgrass beds there. To be honest, around Guernsey, I feel that most bays might have eelgrass present, where you've got that sandy shore. So you've got to look for that habitat, you know, that sandy shore, and then go down at a low spring tide and have a look.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And so, so what's the biggest threat to seagrass, you think, in your view at the moment?
So in the UK, there was in the 1920s a natural disease that rendered quite a lot of the beds to die and to reduce down significantly. In the UK, some of those haven't really fully grown back. So that's something to consider when we're thinking of the Bailiwick and the Channel Islands eelgrass beds, is that they're quite special, because from what evidence we have, we're not really sure that actually happened in the Channel Islands. So I feel as a starter, we need to think that, well, our beds are quite important really in terms of thinking of that natural disaster. In terms of threats now, they're very vulnerable to disturbance. So if we think about, we've got this lovely like blades in the grass, in the sand, and then that root system I was telling you about is actually only about 5 centimeters deep. It's not a very like long or big deep root system, so it can be disturbed quite easily. This happens in the winter anyway, so sometimes if you're walking along the shore, you might see lots of strands of eelgrass and go, oh what's that, oh, that's really interesting, but it's just because the tides and the winds and the weather have ripped up the root systems. So what we have to think of, it's quite shallow, so any type of disturbance that can be natural. So things like climate change, where our climate is changing, things that will have, and those extreme weather events, if we keep getting more of these extreme weather events, then that might have a threat to it, definitely. I think in terms of human use, coastal development, there again, you're disturbing the sediments, if you're digging or building, and that doesn't have to be exactly on the site, it could be adjacent to, so you're not, when you start disturbing the water column, you might get sediment that impacts the clarity of the water and turbidity, which reduces it to photosynthesize. So there's two key things there. It's very much like the habitat loss, like pulling up, disturbing that like the sandy sediment, and then it's blocking the light for it to photosynthesize. But I feel things like coastal development are one of the key threats to eelgrass, sadly.
I know that in the Mediterranean, there's a big controversial point about anchors and pleasure boats. Is that something that you think is? I'm a member of the yacht club, so I'm quite keen on my boating. But I think, do you think that there could be things to be done to avoid people?
Yeah, I think there is. If there are future alternatives looking at eco moorings, so that is something that I would personally like to look into. I know there are some research projects in the UK that are looking at these user-friendly like mooring systems, because again, like what you've just said there, it's the anchor, it's disturbing the habitat, and it's like not only just damaging the eelgrass as soon as it hits, but it may well disturb sediment into the system and then block out its ability to photosynthesize, because we have to remember it's a terrestrial plant that's just adapted itself to the marine environment. But I think more like, you know, eco moorings, what we know of as well, and it's really hard because humans are really good at picking the wrong times to do pleasure boating. So because we know that eelgrass is at its, you know, maximum potential in terms of productivity is in the summer. So that it's that key time, July, August, that it's, you know, to me, I would like to protect, you know, disturbance in any form. But obviously we know that pleasure boaters like to go at that time. So you're seeing, you know, maybe protecting some areas from like moorings, but really looking into eco moorings, where they don't necessarily touch the bottom, or at least don't create, you know, like that effect of a chain going round and around as the sea moves it. So something like that would be great.
Cool. Well, yeah, I know from previously owning a boat, I know that it's finding moorings around Guernsey can be quite a challenge. So, so we can think on that. Okay,
yes,
cool.
Definitely.
So, why do you feel it's important to map out and to have that evidence-based approach to be able to preserve seagrass?
So, like I said, up until sort of now, we're at the point where we've got a beautiful map where people have marked where they've seen eelgrass, which has been brilliant. Something that I've been working on with my colleagues here in Alderney is because, well, we're smaller and we don't have as many bays as Guernsey. So last summer we were able to go out and map the extent of the eelgrass. And we used a kayak and video cameras and snorkelers that, you know, to work out the boundaries. For Guernsey, I think that would be absolutely ideal for us to start mapping the extents, like how big are these beds? So it can change on the conditions of the site that the eelgrass is found in. You can have, you know, clumps of eelgrass. So just in a bay by itself. So it might not necessarily be a true bed. It might just be a little, you know, patchy side. And I go, well, it's not really a habitat. It's just it's a little thing doing it by itself in a corner. There may be somewhere else which is a really thick, healthy, dense bed that's brimming of life. But we really need that extent. We need to know, you know, how big is it? Where is it? And then we can start to build layers of information. If we want to, you know, across the Bailiwick, look at preserving, or at least looking at some conservation objectives for this important habitat, looking at its spatial extent is quite important. It's a key parameter to looking at protection of marine habitats.
Okay, yeah, so clearly an important issue there. And what I wanted to ask, in fact, it's leading very well to my next question, was that if you had a I don't want to say unlimited, but in an ideal world, what would be your next objectives in terms of making seagrass protection a real thing, and what potential also does it have for carbon sequestration? You've alluded on that so previously.
I think if I had everything in the world, I think the first step is, for me, I'm always led by evidence. I think before we can start shouting at the top of the roofs like how great we are that we've got all these eelgrass beds, I think we really need to nail down on the evidence. And I feel for the Bailiwick, we're not there yet. We've made a great start. We know the locations of some of these important habitats around our waters, but we really need that next step up if we're looking at, you know, protected areas, or at least really core proactive conservation objectives. They need to be based on solid science. And I feel this is where we're at a really exciting starting point. So if I had everything, all the money, all the boats, all the boat face things. That is, we really need to get that core evidence. You know, how big are these beds? Are they connected? What life lives in them? You know, which of them are under threat? You know, have we got ones that look like they're, you know, there's a little bit too much human use there, or are there other, you know, littering, that sort of thing. So we really need to like build layers of information of our beds throughout the Bailiwick, because, you know, we're looking, our waters aren't that big and they may well be connected. So if we start protecting some beds, you know, in the future we could look at protecting others. I think part of that as well is it should be community, you know, we should be engaging with our communities on these beds to explain like how important they are, what they do for the marine environment, but what also do they do for us, like looking at, you know, actually they're helping with coastal erosion, they're helping shelter our shores to be sheltered. They could potentially have, you know, like you said, storing these stocks of organic carbon, like blue carbon sites. So for me, it's very much getting you know, a high level core evidence for us to all sit down, and that's with stakeholders, the government, more NGOs and the public, to say we've got this really important habitat. We're facing things like climate change, ocean acidification, humans growing, you know, we're still populating, and you know, let's do something that's useful for all of us and yet still helps protect this important habitat.
Is to look through the sustainable angle as well, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, you know, we all still live on the coast. We still, you know, we still have to work within the coast. You know, we can't ignore like human activities, but it's trying to get it all to work together. You know, it's, you know, there may be compromises, there may not, we might all work happily ever after, but it's just, you know, let's get the evidence first, bring everyone in and show them like this is what we've got. Let's think about protecting it, using, you know, really useful tools out there.
Okay, and so I suppose with that, then we've got, if we want to, I think you mentioned before that your project was rather successful because it was kind of a citizen science type. You reach out and people invested some time to discover about those things. What would you advise people to do if they've got passion for this? What can they do? Get in touch?
Oh yes, please.
Or I don't know.
So we have our little Bailiwick Eelgrass Exploration project. It's still ongoing, so we're still, like last summer, we still did quite a few social media like requests for eelgrass, and I was completely inundated. I was so excited. I think one post I got 45 sightings from people just saying, I've seen it here, you know, and sending me pictures. And then I collated all of those and put them into I submitted them to the Guernsey Record Centre, because we're building that picture. If you're really interested in helping us map eelgrass beds, we've got, hopefully, at the end of March, we're going to be running another eelgrass workshop. I might be able to come to Guernsey in person, do that, or we might be looking at doing it online. So it's more training, and it's really simple. Don't be overwhelmed and think I'm not a scientist. It's not about that. It's a really nice habitat to spot. As soon as I show you some pictures and tell you some jokes, you'll feel much comfortable about going out recording for me, and for, you know, the Record Centre in Guernsey, and, you know, all our other partners like the Green Guerns that we're linked to. That's the start. You know, you can help start, get that, you know, get your foot in the water, go and find some for me, you know, on a nice day at a low tide, and then tell us your stories. Photos are fantastic. You know, they speak, you know, gives us the time, the dates, you know, the extent, how healthy those beds are. So just little pointers if you don't feel confident to do, you know, really, you know, in-depth work with us. That's a great start. Like I said, we're going to do some workshops. I think I'm going to start doing some more sort of outreach in terms of like getting to other stakeholders to record, like sea swimmers. You know, they're brilliant. They're out there now. Yeah. I mean, it's freezing out there, and they're just, I've been swimming.
And it gives them an extra reason, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, I have to go out in a dry suit, I'll just, go record for, if you come across eelgrass, great, record, but get some boundary stuff, get some more photos, those sort of things.
Yeah, I think that's good.
We're
Also,
all,
I know that mobile phones record the position as well, so
yes,
that's a
yeah,
good thing
absolutely
to have.
fantastic. And then we're linked to Guernsey Sea Search. So if you're not aware, if there's someone listening, Sea Search is another citizen science project where it trains recreational snorkelers and scuba divers to record what they see when they're out there for fun. I'm trained. I'm linked with the Guernsey Sea Search, which I'm really excited about. I snorkel more than I dive, so literally you go out for a bit of fun and you write down what you see. And it's the project's now 30 years old. It is a UK based one, but they do a lot in the Channel Islands, and it is an accepted method for other governments like the UK government to consider the evidence to build into protected areas. So for the UK, it was a really important tool, all the diver collection, data to then think about their marine protected areas. So that is based on Guernsey, and we're looking at setting up online courses for that, because the UK national coordinator can't obviously come at the moment. So she's helping us probably in about 2 months time to set up online courses. And then you can meet, there is an active Guernsey Sea Search team, and then you can meet and go out with them. And I'll hopefully come and join you at some point, and we can go and have a look at doing some recording. So there's lots of different ways. You're welcome to contact me, or through Green Guerns, or the Guernsey Biological Record Centre. We're all here. We're very happy to get everyone started to start recording this important habitat.
So I think you mentioned the fact that it's being part of a global database, and do you think that our local ecosystem are special, and then they are interested in knowing about the richness of what we have here, or
definitely, yeah. I feel I moved to Alderney almost 14 years ago, and it is and it's the Channel Islands, the Bailiwick, are so special in terms of their marine life. And that's why I've stayed. It is absolutely tremendous. I feel it's very important for lots of different reasons. There's something, we're slightly warmer. We've got, so in my mind, we've got higher productivity. Some of our tides are really fast, and that brings a lot of constant nutrient flowing. So there's lots of little things that are slightly different in the Bailiwick compared to, say, Europe and the UK. I think we fit in this really special location in terms of marine life and marine environments. And I also feel it's quite under-recorded. And I feel that because of those two key things, I feel we're quite important to the UK and bigger eelgrass projects. In terms of eelgrass restoration projects, we know that, like I said at the start of the talk, we know in the UK they had a real decline in the 1920s. They don't actually know how bad a decline it was, because obviously in the 20s the marine recording wasn't as great, or when an impact happens, it wasn't as in-depth recording as much as it is now. So one of the key reasons they knew it declined is because some of the wading birds that feed on eelgrass actually switched diets. That is the only real record of knowledge of that impact on UK beds. What we managed to get, I think it was last year, I have to apologise, I think it was 2019, we did help. There's a new restoration project in Wales, in Dale, and that's with Swansea University and Project Seagrass, whereby they are attempting to grow a brand new bed, to see if that's a really nice mitigation way to deal with the impact of the poor beds in the from the 1920s, and see it as a tool to help restore beds. And they collected, I think it was something like over 1 million seeds across the British Isles, including ones from Guernsey and Alderney. And it was when we were discussing this with Dr. Richard Unsworth, who runs the project, he was really keen on eelgrass seeds from the Bailiwick, because he felt that because of that slightly warmer temperature, we've got the chance that, in transporting seeds to the UK, that live in conditions that are slightly warmer and deal with more extreme different events, it might make the bed that they're trying to grow now to be more resilient to climate change and that that increase of temperatures. So I think in terms of UK restorations projects, I think the Bailiwick could be really important in the future.
And my final question is about I was made aware that there is a potential for eelgrass to absorb microplastics. Is that something that you could talk to us about?
Yeah, I did read this piece in The Guardian, and I'm up and down about it. I'll be completely honest. I think it's fascinating that they managed to find like the plastic living within the eelgrass. I don't know personally if our beds have it, because obviously it's quite an intrusive, they were finding it in the sands. So I'm very much, I like to leave eelgrass where it is doing its own thing, unless we're recording it for a scientific purpose. So I can't say for our beds that this is occurring. And I'm also quite sad about it, because it's another example of humans impacting upon the environment. So it's great in one sense that, oh wow, it's sucking all this plastic up, but that wasn't its core goal. To me, it's this highly biodiverse site. It's got squid laying eggs. It's got juvenile commercial fish like floating around, taking shelter from the winter. It's full of eggs from mollusks. There's starfish, there's sea anemones, there's little burrowing. It's protecting us from coastal erosion, and yet there's this story, this scientific paper suggesting it's also not only holding carbon for us to reduce or mitigate for climate change, but now it's also seen as a plastic collection site. And I feel quite upset, and I feel like it's my fault as a that's what I've left my mark on in the marine environment. So yeah, I'm quite sad. I know it can be seen as a positive that people going, oh, it's sucking up plastic, but that isn't the message we should be saying. We should say this has to stop. We're at that point now where we're all adults.
I think unfortunately plastic
we know what we're doing. Let's try and let's reduce that. Let's stop that happening.
Mel, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you out there.